The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hola and welcome back to the show. Any side out, that's the show. Show number 610. Thank you very much.
Wait,
donate if you can.
In the prior show, we talked about offending people.
What? That's a hodgepodge of accents. Something for everyone to hate, I'm sure. Donate if you can. This is important. As you probably heard in the break, this is Listener Funded Radio. We don't get paid. I'd like to get paid. One day, that'd be nice. But no, we do this for free because Dave and I think it's important. As I'm sure the other hosts also believe this to be important work. And all the money that is raised goes to supporting the station. Electricity is not cheap. And sending signals out, keeping keeping it scheduled and keeping people interested, keeping the licenses up to date. That's important. There's a whole bunch of stuff you need to, if you run a business. Dave and I do that. There are things you have to do. It's just nature of the beast. That's life. So if you can help with that, awesome. But we are talking about the hypothesis. Every 100 shows, we try to connect the dots over the last 12 13 years, and we tried to bring it all together. Now, this particular show cycle has 94 pages, and we are probably about halfway through it now, which is good. But we discussed a whole bunch of stuff. Hard to recap it all, so we won't here. Suffice it to say, now we're at the stage where we need to look at our reality. Movies like The Matrix, The 13th Floor, Existence, others like that as well, of course, but those ones I really enjoy the most, I guess. And some other independent movies. They tell us that maybe we are not living in the reality we think we are. In Plato's cave allegory, that goes back 2,000 years, and I'm sure in other civilizations prior to this one, there were similar thoughts, stipulates that, all of us are caught in a cave. It's an allegory. Obviously, we're not sitting in a cave. And all we see are shadows on the wall, which we think signify real life. That's real life happening on those shadows. That's the reality there. But if you overlay that to where we are, then all the interactions we have every day, all the things we do and say and engage in that are important to us, etc., are in fact not, but mere shadows, potentially, of the real world that we cannot perceive. A movie, They Live, has a beautiful graphical representation of that, even better than The Matrix, where the protagonist, and this was based on the short story 8 o'clock in the morning, which is brilliant, by the way. It's only a few pages, but it's a brilliant short. No wonder John Carpenter had to make a movie out of it. But the point is this. The protagonist finds this box of black sunglasses, like they look like Ray-Ban sunglasses, back from the 80s. And that's what they look like. And he puts it on, and it sort of gives him a headache. But when he goes outside, he looks around, the whole world appears in black and white now, because of, I guess, the lens that he is wearing. And he sees billboards that have, big black bold letters on white background with words like obey, sleep, reproduce, don't question authority, etc.
And those images and words, Mackie, were there when he lifts his glasses. What's he see? He sees the original advertising, right?
Yeah, he sees the real world. There's a billboard advertising cigarettes or liquor or whatever, and the paper is the same, and magazines. And when he takes the glasses off, he sees what we all see, the content of the magazine. When he puts the glasses on, he sees the actual reality of what it is, which we can't see because apparently it seems there's a signal that is broadcast and across the world, in fact, which alters our perception. It changes the way that our optical input perceives signals, and those signals that are perceived incorrectly are then interpreted by our brain to be the real thing, which they're not. But we subconsciously still see the messaging, like obey, comply, etc., that are there. So we do take it in, just not on a conscious level. So that's what he finds out. And for me, the putting on of the glasses and seeing a reality is wonderful. The funny thing is, in the short story, the protagonist doesn't find sunglasses. What he does, he goes to a hypnotist, and the hypnotist puts him under, and then a show happens, whatever, and then the hypnotist says, "Wake up," and he did, except he really woke up, meaning he
was impervious to those signals.
Correct. That's exactly right. He shut down the signal in himself.
Mm-hmm.
And look, the outcome in the story, unfortunately, is the same as in the movie. But the point here is that it's a beautiful visual representation of maybe what we all fall prey to. Because we've discussed this before, and this is really important as we're going into the reality of our reality. Our visual input system is very easily fooled and manipulated. If it wasn't, magic wouldn't work. If it wasn't, optical illusions wouldn't work. And there are certain preconceived or predetermined filters that we all have. One of them is to recognize shapes. We want to see shapes. We want to see patterns. Like if you look at a cloud, I'm sure you've played this game as a child or maybe with your children now, I don't know, whatever. But you look at clouds and you see the shapes form animals or castles or witches or lollipops or whatever, right? Now, they're clouds, but you can see that shape in the cloud. Similarly with rocks and other things. We try to give meaning to the world around us, right? That's a very deep, fundamental thing that we have psychologically. That's how we perceive reality. We try to process it into things we understand, right? Now, that can fool us a lot. And misdirection is another one. And I have to mention this, I know we've probably mentioned it 1,000 times on the show, but it is really important because it illustrates beautifully what I'm talking about. There's this video I watched, and the instructions were follow the red ball. There's two teams. One passes a red ball, one passes a white ball. You count how many times the red ball passes from player to player. It's about 10 people in the shot, right? You just look at the shot of 10 people, and off you go. So and I'm gonna win, right? That's the kind of guy I am. So I'm counting. I'm all focused on the red ball, and I count. And it's like 13 times. They go, oh, sweet, I win. Nah. And so the actual test was what you didn't see. Yeah. Because when the video finished, and so how many times was the ball passed, and you go, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. That wasn't the test. The question is, did you see the gorilla?
And you go,
I go, what?
You could, don't.
No,
don't.
Not gorilla.
I counted, it was 23 or something, right? Whatever the number was.
Yeah, whatever the number was. So I went back to watch the video again.
Yep.
And sure enough,
yep,
right in front of my eyes, while I was counting the passes of the red ball between players, like hand-to-hand pass, whatever, doesn't matter. There was a man.
They bounce them between each other.
Yeah. There was a full-grown man, like as tall as any other of the other figures in the video, in a gorilla suit, and I actually had one of those suits. I did actually own one at one point.
Oh, I remember.
And he was right, and he was walking through the screen, stopping, making obscene gestures, all kinds of things, right? And I swear to you, I did not see him the first time around because my focus was on the red ball, and that's what I mean by how easily our optical input system is fooled. That's how magic works as well. They misdirect your attention. Oh, look over here, nothing right. And sometimes when you see the trick, you go, how could I have missed that? Because, unfortunately, at least visually, we can't focus on too many things at once because survival. That's the reason, survival, right? Our peripheral vision is geared toward motion. You will never not see motion out of the corner of your eye.
Mm-hmm.
If you see motion out of the corner of your eye, there probably is motion. Even if when you look, there is nothing there. There might have been a mouse or a bug or whatever, but you saw something. It was there. It's extremely accurate. Okay? The acuity is extremely high. Not for shapes or anything. It's just motion. That's what it detects. Whereas whatever you see in front of you, especially if there are certain things that you expect, we'll get to the expectation in a second, then you block everything else out. In fact, you might not see certain things because you don't expect them to be there, or because your brain says, well, this is not important, I don't have to look at that. I don't have to worry about that. There's no saber-tooth tiger trying to eat. It doesn't matter, right? So you miss things, right? That's why it's so important when you're driving to pay attention, and you really have to, right? It's no good watching TV. Like I see some people, they're watching, like on their phone. See, if you're driving and you're texting or you're doing anything on your phone, right? You're looking to die. That's right. That's what you do. Okay, I'm sorry, but that's what you do.
You're enrolled in the temporary human sweepstakes.
That's right. And the Darwin Award goes to. But that's the truth, because we can't pay attention to the road while something else has engaged our attention, especially something as insidious as a little mobile device. Mm-hmm. But this expectation goes much deeper, it seems, because you expect to see something, you see it, it's all good, right? It seems it goes down to the very most fundamental level of our existence. And again, I know we talked about it. In the double slit experiment, it is all about expectation that causes the collapse of the wave function. Because if there's no expectation, it doesn't collapse.
That's
I don't care, Mr. Physicist. I don't care how you switch it and how you're trying to, to depersonalize it. But that's fundamentally the truth. If I am wrong, please tell me how I'm wrong.
Yeah.
If I measure it, all right, if I measure it, I have an outcome. If I don't measure it, I have a completely different outcome. Are you telling me the electron knows it's being measured and it's just playing silly buggers? Right? It's there again. We spoke about this on Thursday about the meme and such. We're all imprisoned by the ideas we hold in our heads, right?
That's right.
Which is true. Which is absolutely true. So, long preamble, Dave. Sorry, but this is important because now we're going to talk about a couple of really controversial, interesting topics, and this is around the evidence that our reality is digital. Unless there was something else you wanted to add, Dave?
I just want to say, I put in the chat room the video with the A and B squares, and I move a shaded piece around on the board, and you'll be surprised which squares it lines up with and which it doesn't. And our brain makes it so that it's what we expect to see doesn't happen.
That's a good one, actually. That's a really good one.
And I did that at work. I actually printed that thing out and just cut the square out of the other copy, and I just move it around, right? And it does your head in, and it's the reason why predators, predation, those animals on the African, in the African desert, who have a dark color on top and a light color beneath themselves. So their tummies are whiter than their back. The back is darker because a normal creature will be light on top and dark underneath. And it goes against the predator's ability to see them. And this is a great example of how that works. But on a human brain, who even thought, Mackie? I never thought that would be what happened, and I did it for myself. And when I was beside myself with
I know, right?
With appreciation for this. A cast shadow over a checkerboard does things to our brain.
100%. And I studied when I was at uni, one of my subjects was neuropsychology, and this was, of course, now 30 years ago, right? But the truth is, back then we had no idea. We didn't know how people learned. We didn't know how memory was processed.
That's right.
We didn't really understand very much of what's going on in the brain. We understood some of the psychology of it. right? The personality, such and the subconscious, etc. But we
not
understood
the practical.
almost
Didn't
yeah,
know. Yeah.
but we understood almost none of the mechanics underneath it.
Yeah.
And we've gone along much further, but we still don't know a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Memory. See, we used to think there was this place in the brain that is responsible for memory, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
For argument's sake. But we know now that is not true, because different areas of the brain are activated as you access memory. And if you lose parts of your brain, God forbid, your brain rewires itself, and you can still access. I mean, it depends on the severity of your brain damage, of course.
And it's called neuroplasticity.
That's correct, and that goes away the older you get, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Which is really interesting. It's together with fluid intelligence, right? That you can deal more easily with concept, languages, etc., etc. So,
and then you have Joe Biden, Mickey.
Then you have neuroconcrete.
Concrete.
That's it.
Neuroconcrete. Flexible.
He's got cement in his head, sir. Sorry, but that's
sorry. There was a cross line.
We shouldn't. It's almost too easy to pick on it, right?
It is.
Look, I let you choose whether or not you wish to start or if you wish to go second.
I'm going to start. This is evidence that our reality is digital. Number 1. Breakdown of infinite resolution in physics. Infinite resolution causes all sorts of breakdowns of known laws of physics, including matter imploding into black holes at sub-Planck scales and the inability to reconcile general relativity with quantum mechanics. Let's let that sink in. Currently favoured theories of matter and energy, which is string theory, and solutions to gravity and quantum mechanics, loop quantum gravity, assume a minimal length scale. Furthermore, evidence supports the notion that quantum states are digital, in that spin values are quantized and there are no intermediate states, which is anomalous in a continuous space-time. That means they don't work in space-time. As renowned physicist John Wheeler concluded, every physical quantity, and I'm quoting, every it derives its ultimate significance from bits, binary yes or no indications.
Which, of course, if we were living in an analog universe, wouldn't be true. And there should be intermediate states between spin values.
Yeah.
Like transitional states, if you want to call them that, right? But doesn't seem to be the case. So either we haven't found them yet, these transitional states, if you will, intermediate states, but they're not really intermediate, they're transitional, going from one spin direction to another. So it's almost instantaneous spin change, right? That's what it looks like. Anyway, okay. Now this is actually following right up from this one. The breakdown of infinite resolution in information systems. It takes, and this is about, I guess, the rendering component. It takes an infinite amount of resources to create a continuous reality, but a finite amount to create a quantized reality, right? So if you've got the parameters set out for your environment, then you know what kind of resources you need to render it. Pretty straightforward stuff. The very nature of the conceptual mechanisms of a computer are essentially the same as quantum mechanics. A sequence of states with nothing existing or happening between the states. The resolution of any program is analogous to the spatial resolution of our reality, just at a different level. In fact, carrying Moore's law, consistent over the past 40 years forward, computers will reach the Planck resolution in 2192. However, it is not necessary to model reality all the way to that level for the model to be indistinguishable from reality. Now, imagine that in 150 odd years or so, 160 years, we can create computer models indistinguishable from reality. Now, it might happen sooner, but Moore's law has been pretty consistent so far, right? That's mind-blowing if you think about it. We can create reality which will have no difference to the reality we inhabit. I find this mind-blowing. Now, however, it is not necessary, again, to model reality all the way to that level for the model to be indistinguishable from our reality. Only the observed elements of reality need to be modeled. And then only down to a resolution that matches the observational limits of our measurement device. Meaning, you only have to render it down or model it down to what is being perceived or can be perceived. So if you've got a room, you don't have to model all the subatomic elements. You know what I mean? You don't have to, because you just say, no, that's just a room, boom, done, right? So you could, but you don't have to, unless this is an astrophysicist that wants to study particles. I don't know. It's possible. A program can do this dynamically. I remember the day lighting became dynamic in computer games.
Yes.
It was Diablo 2. I think. And the game came out, and what they said, one of the biggest selling points of that game was the advanced AI engine that it had for character creation, but also for rendering of the environment. And what it said was, it doesn't matter what you do in the game, all the light is dynamic, all the light and all the shadows. And it made a massive difference to the game. It added such a huge layer of realism. I was blown away, but that was now many 20, 25 years ago. But I remember when, for the first time, the interplay between light and shadow in a game became dynamic, not pre-rendered. It was rendered as it happened. Anyway, sorry.
Oh no! I
showing my
get
age.
it. No. To get it, and just to expand upon that, the next revolution was ray tracing.
Yes.
So that is light bouncing around the environment is now being modeled, and it's all done on the graphics card rather than being rendered by code. It's not. It's a reactionary thing that's being rendered, and ray tracing is it, and it looks incredible, and it's the thing that was missing from the reality perspective. Like if you compare the rendered game against something equivalent in reality, what were these differences, right? And there's also, when you're looking at human skin in a rendered environment, we've now got to the point where we have subdermal reflections and light absorption and reflection back out through the layers, where that was never something we could afford code to write. The computers weren't fast enough. So now it's all happening in real time. And when you look at, say, Princess Leia's rendering in that last Star Wars movie, which was appalling, or even on the time standard of the time period. ILM really failed. But today, if it was redone, it would look real. For all intents and purposes, right? So, because we can deep fake now, we can deep fake so well that it's impossible to tell unless you know it was a deep fake.
Yeah, and then when Dave and I had lunch this week, in fact, he mentioned the Scorpion King and how somebody had just done it at home.
Yeah, that's right.
But the Scorpion King, that was just the worst.
It was awful.
Ever.
Yeah,
it was dreadful. But apparently they fixed it.
I didn't see it at the cinema, Mackie, but if I had, I would have vomited it into my popcorn.
I reckon you would have walked out, my friend.
Yes.
No. Okay, so now
Number
a program
3.
can do this. Sorry?
No, go on.
Okay, so a program, as I said, can do this dynamically, right? Therefore, given Moore's law and the limitations of observational reality, we should be able to create virtual realities that are indistinguishable from our current reality within 20 years or so.
That's right.
I think we're getting there really fast. The very fact that our reality appears to be quantized, maybe, not, there's no definite yet, considered strong evidence that reality, in fact, is programmed, and in fact, we are potentially living in a simulation.
It's a pretty good one, but geez, you can imagine that it would be. All right. Number 3, Mackie, this is the third point here. The simulation argument itself. Various modern philosophers and scientists have posited that we are likely to be living in a simulation. Nick Bostrom, for instance. This is because it is highly probable that we will be able to create ancestor simulations within a few years. When we achieve a transhuman stage, due to either the number of simulations that will be run or to the proximity that we are to that stage. It is actually more probable that we are in one than the case where we haven't yet reached that stage.
Yeah. So in simple terms, it is mathematically or statistically speaking more plausible, more probable
that we are
that
in one.
we are living in a simulation than not.
Already. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying we are. It's just if you're a statistician.
These are arguments. Yeah, it's okay.
A probability
The
engineer.
audience is smart, Trini. Far out. The audience is smart, Mickey.
That's right, Trini. Hey, Gustav. Meta is data. This is really interesting. So I'm going to be going slow with this one. And this is really important to understand how our view of the universe has actually changed. Our view of reality has changed over time. Now, it was once thought that 0% of matter was empty space. So if you've got a block of iron, if you've got a coffee cup, a computer, a bottle of water, it doesn't matter what. It was thought that, well, this is pretty much all matter, right? This is all solid stuff, right? I mean, it's not air in between. This is material stuff. Therefore, it fills the space completely, right? That was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be no empty space per se in matter. However, in the early 20th century, and then you might have seen these models in high school, physics models of atoms. In the early 20th century, scientists discovered that atoms are actually comprised of subatomic particles, right? If these subatomic particles, such as neutrons, were made of solid mass, like little billiard balls, for example, and that's probably how you would have seen it in school, then 99.99999999999% of normal matter would still be empty space. So let's think of an atom as the solar system. So you've got the nucleus, which is the sun, for argument's sake. Then you got neutrons and such, electrons floating about this core, this nucleus, at about the same distance that the planets have from the sun, relatively speaking. And there's nothing in between. Nothing.
That's right.
You've got these subatomic particles, and they're floating about, creating, I guess, a cloud, as it were, because they used to think there was just these rings around, which is not really correct. It's more like a cloud. And it's worse than that. It's actually a cloud of probabilities as well.
That's right.
Where it gets really tricky, and this is where quantum mechanics comes in. You can look at where an electron is, but you can't tell which way it's going, or which way it's spinning, rather, right? So I can tell you where it is, but that's all I can tell you. And if I can't tell you where it is, I can tell you which way it's spinning. So it becomes very complex. But the upshot, or the point here is that because they are subatomic particles in atoms, it means that the atom itself, and therefore matter itself, is largely empty space. And that's also why an object like the sun, for example, can collapse into a black hole. And if the sun collapses into a black hole, it will be, in fact, a very tiny little sphere. And a teaspoon of black hole matter, if you will, would weigh several million tons. A teaspoon. That's how much a black hole would be compressed in on itself. But what it also shows you just how much empty space there is to be compressed. Right? So we're living in a sort of a soap bubble universe where everything is very fluffy. We're living in a fluffy, cloudy universe, it seems. Now, that is, of course, unless those particles themselves are not really solid matter, in which case, even more of space is truly empty. Now, this talks about string, but let's just allow that for a second. This was shown to be the case in the 60s via QCD, or quark theory. Now, string theorists say that even quarks are really just vibrating bits of string. Now, let's be clear. We know that subatomic particles are made up of quarks, which have even more empty space between them. Okay. Now with strings, okay, I need to say here, there's zero evidence for string theory. Zero. However, string theorists say that even quarks are really just vibrating bits of string, possibly with the width of the Planck length. Now, again, we don't know that. What we do know is atoms have subatomic particles, mostly empty space. Subatomic particles are made up of quarks, mostly empty space. We know that. We don't know about strings. Okay? Now, if so, that would make subatomic particles all but 1 to the power of 38 empty space. That's a lot of empty space. Hence, normal matter is all but 1 to the power of 52 empty space. At this point, it's actually ridiculous because there is no solid anything except black holes. They're solid. Black holes, Dave, are probably the only thing that you could call solid in this universe because it just collapsed in on itself so much there's no space.
Yeah, because
so it's in fact the opposite of a hole.
I know. I came up with and discussed this with my physics teacher.
Oh, good.
About the transparent universe that we live in. If you were the size of a subatomic particle, the only things that would appear solid to you would be black holes. You could say.
That's right.
You could also say, pulsars, right? But for that matter, let's just say black holes. So everything else would appear transparent to you because they'd have such large voids between everything. Yeah. It would just be like clouds. You're right.
It'd be that, yeah, exactly. So
you could pass, if you were a subatomic particle, as they currently do anyway, just go through the Earth.
And you see, this is yeah, exactly. This is what I find. This just occurred to me, actually. This is what I find fascinating. So instead of calling it a black hole, let's call it a black solid, because that's what it is.
That's right.
Or super solid,
that's
or
right,
whatever.
Super solid, yeah.
But in fact, or the only true solid.
That's right.
Don't care. So, but if that's true, just for a second, right? Is it solid enough to punch through fluffy space into other fluffy spaces? What I mean by that is this. Let's say you've got a lead ball, for argument's sake, right? And it's like it's in a styrofoam kind of environment, right? If you take that lead ball, it'll get through the styrofoam shell pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to stop it, right? It's going to go through it. Is it possible then that because these black solids, we're not going to call them black holes anymore, black solids, because that's what they are the only true indication of the reality of this universe? Everything else seems to exist in a probabilistic state because it is so fluffy. A black hole is not fluffy. I think in a black hole, the quantum mechanical world is very different. I think it's completely determined. Every particle has its place. There's no question about where this electron is or which way it spins, because there's just nowhere for it to go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's the ultimate determinant. A black solid, I have to really teach myself not to say hole anymore.
Mm-hmm.
A black solid does not allow for quantum mechanics to work.
That's right.
Because it couldn't. Hopefully, I'm going to write that down. Anyway, sorry. Let's get back to the text now. Like I said, it gets ridiculous, right? In fact, if particles are comprised of strings, which they're not because there's no evidence, why do we even need the idea that there is something material? Isn't it enough to define the different types of matter by the single number, the frequency at which the string vibrates? And look, the truth is all particles vibrate at certain frequencies. Don't need a string for that. But what is matter anyway? Is it a number assigned to a type of object that has to do with how that object behaves in a gravitational field? Well, yes, it is. In other words, it's just a rule. We don't really experience matter. What we experience is electromagnetic radiation influenced by some object that we call matter, which is visual, and the effect of the electromagnetic force rule due to the repulsion of charges between the electron shells of the atoms in our fingers and the electron shells of the atoms in the object, which is tactile. In other words, rules. In any case, if you extrapolate our scientific progress, it is easy to see that the ratio of stuff to space is trending towards zero.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that again. the ratio of stuff to space is trending towards zero. All of a sudden, the 98% of the missing universe makes a lot more sense. Which means what? What it means is that matter is mostly just data. And the forces that cause us to experience matter the way we do are just rules about how data interacts with itself. For example, probability wave functions follow patterns described accurately by relatively simple mathematical equations that resemble probability functions that apply to data and rules. That's all there needs to be. By Occam's razor, this is the simpler and more likely way to describe matter. It only requires pure data. That's a real, to me, that is a real game changer to see it from that point of view. The illusion of reality, Dave.
Yeah, well, I want to expand upon your example that you said a little earlier. All right, so say we have a hydrogen atom, and we were taught that it is still the accepted method of teaching someone the concept of atoms, whereas you have a nucleus in the middle, and there is a proton and a neutron pair. They're anti to each other, but there's a pair of those in total for every single electron. So a hydrogen atom has a single electron, but it has two, one proton, one neutron in the nucleus. That's just the way it is. And if that was to be represented as the nucleus being the center of the atom, as the size of a, I don't know, basketball, and the electron was a ping pong ball, you would have to drive 26 miles away and hold it in the air and go, that's the position of the hydrogen atom in its shell relative to the nucleus. It's insane how little space is actually consumed by the atom itself. So I just wanted to bring that out to make it so people understand. And a black hole has, like, remember, Mickey, when you would zip a file or rar a file in a computer?
Yeah.
If it was a spreadsheet, I still do it too, but if there was a spreadsheet or something, then or a database for that matter, you could zip it up to be extremely small compared to the size of the database, because most of the things were null values. There was just blank lines.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So, to do that, you're doing what a black hole does. So the file itself, which was in its uncompressed format, and then you've got the compressed format version, which is like the black hole. All the characters are crushed against each other, and to the point where they can't crush each other anymore. So if you think about it like that, the file's huge. The zip file is really tiny. And now, so I just wanted to make sure you keep that in mind. Now, there's something really unusual about this, and it's going to make sense in a second. Neons, you have an electrified gas in a tube, and it produces not a single wavelength of light, but two separate wavelengths of light from the same gas, meaning that there is no transition from one frequency to another. It's making both kind of at the same time. But you can't make both at the same time. The electron has to move from one shell to another, but it's instantaneous. There is no transitional color between the two. And this is astounding people who are delving into the quantum world, because it's, what color is it supposed to be? I don't know, pink, is that right? Yeah, cool. And what's that made up of? These two colors. How does it make both colors? I don't know. It shouldn't. So where is it? And the uncertainty principle, Mackie, is where we have the location of the electron at any time. It's just, it's, don't know where it is, but if I point, there's an equation that will say how close you might be to it. That's it. That's it. So we're still vastly misinformed by physics or by science, yet on the actual makeup of an atom. All the models we used are great for science and chemistry by being able to have valent and covalent bonds and valent positions in its shell, and electrons that are free radicals. They can go from one to another. Electricity moves electrons around from that. Just, it's like the game with the chairs and the music when it stops, and you've got to sit on a chair, right? But there's less chairs than there are people. So anyway, so saying all of that puts you in a position for this number 5, computational analog and the observer effect. Of course, one does not need to model reality all the way to the Planck level for the model to be indistinguishable from our reality. An efficient program would dynamically generate incremental resolutions of various components as needed, such as when an object is put under a microscope. Extending this concept to the quantum level, once a subatomic particle is observed, the program must then establish properties for that particle, effectively resulting in the collapse of the probability wave function. Remembering that everything has to be considered using the uncertainty principle as a wave until you want to observe where it is, and then that collapses the probability down to what we expect it to do. In 2008, the Institute for Quantum Optics and Quantum Information, IQOQI, very nice.
I know, right?
What's that called again?
It's not a palindrome.
It's reversible.
Yeah, I think it's a palindrome.
Yeah. It's not a palindrome. Oh, yes, it is a palindrome. That's very funny. The IQOQI in Vienna determined to a certainty of 80 orders of magnitude that objective reality does not exist by itself and only comes into being when consciously observed. What was that?
It is a palindrome.
It is a palindrome. I thought it might have been. Thus, the uncertainty of this result is one in, and I'm just going to turn the middle screen on for a minute so that I don't have to describe this, but that's the number. It's one in that huge number. It looks like maybe 40 zeros. No, there'd be more than that, 50 zeros behind it.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. Clearly, a ridiculously small number. This effectively puts a nail in the coffin of the last hope for objective realists, the hidden variable theory. Interestingly, we can establish a very real explanation for this effect by turning the evidence question on its head. Thus, quote, if you were to program a universe simulation, what kinds of programmatic efficiencies would be needed? Unquote. Most important would be the employ denied dynamic reality generation. In other words, for any space unobserved by a conscious entity, there is no sense in creating the reality for that space in advance. Now, Mickey and I have said this 1,000 times, and it is, if it's not being viewed, then it's not rendered. There's no point in rendering something that hasn't been seen yet. It just wastes resources. Right? It would unnecessarily consume too many resources. Instead, macroscopic reality may be modelled with an extremely high degree of compression, which I've estimated to be about 100 trillion. Wow. But once you decide to isolate a subatomic particle in that macroscopic object and observe it, the program would then have to establish a definitive position for that particle, effectively resulting in the collapse of the wave function or decoherence. Moreover, the complete behavior of the particle at that point may be forever under control of the program, like a finite state machine. After all, why delete the model once observed? in the likely event that it will be observed again at some point in the future. Thus, an efficient processing of zooming in on reality in the program would result in exactly the type of behavior observed by quantum physicists, fully explaining the observer effect as well as quantum entanglement. Think about those good things. In other words, in order to be efficient resource-wise, the program decoheres only the space and matter that it needs to.
In my mind, this is the strongest argument for the simulation.
Yeah.
For the simulation state, because it only, and this, we need to go back to a very important sentence that you read out, which was, where is it? Consciously. It said consciously.
I don't know.
Here we go. In 2008, the Institute for Quantum Optics and Quantum Information in Vienna determined to a certainty of 80 orders of magnitude, which is big, that objective reality does not exist by itself and only comes into being when consciously observed.
Mm-hmm.
Consciously. And this is the biggest stumbling block that scientists have, to admit that consciousness is required to observe reality to come into being. Which brings me back to the idea that ultimately the idea, a meme, thought, consciousness is at the fundamental level of our reality, right? And then realizing that, well, I only have to render it if you look at it. I'm not going to waste any stuff on it if you're not looking at it, right? More so, though, I think what is really important to understand here is that as we are looking at it, a reality is chosen, right? But the other realities that weren't rendered, but were displayed in the interference pattern, scientists believe to still exist. Just not rendered here because we don't have the resources to render a quadrillion different realities, right? Mm-hmm. But they still exist elsewhere, meaning, of course, that maybe other simulations are running, if in fact this is a simulation. If it is not a simulation, it would, of course, speak very clearly to the multiverse.
That's true.
Theory, which goes down to what's his name, Everett, I think. Anyway, but the point is that this is such a powerful statement by the Aikyoki in Vienna that we can't underestimate it. I'm going to do a bit more research into it to see what they've come up. Because it was some years ago. But Dave, this just blows the mind. It really does.
7 minutes. We
can do one more.
It's
a short one. It's really short. Equations creating reality. To cite one of many examples, it has been shown that the negative frequency solutions to Maxwell's equations actually reveal themselves in components of light. Were our reality what it appears to be, solutions to equations should only make sense in the context of describing reality. Makes sense, right? However, it seems to be the other way around. Data and rules don't manifest from the reality. They create the reality.
Yeah.
So, and this is a really, again, because who creates data and rules and equations? We do. We do.
Yeah.
Ideas. See, this is why we won't have time to go into the next one. It's a long one. Sorry. But this is why it's important to really just spend two moments at this, because if we are creating reality with our thoughts, consciousness, intent, whatever you're going to call it, I don't care. That means that positive manifestations, and I've told you before that I did this years ago. I wrote down all the things that I wanted to achieve in life, etc. And I wrote it down 7 times a day over 7 weeks. And all of the things I wrote down have manifested themselves, except one. But the night is young. So it is clear that prayer is the thing, manifestation of realities. But you know what? And this is gonna
really bake your noodle.
S word. This is well, yes, it will, but it will also piss a lot of people off. Pardon my French.
I'm up for it.
You know what it also means? We create the gods we believe in.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? If we manifest reality, we create the deities that people populate, rather, our pantheons. No one else but us creates them because of our belief. And the more people believe in something, the more of a reality it becomes. It's funny. There's this
turn your back
adage.
on advertising, Mickey, and it goes away.
That's the way. Well, it does though, right?
That's right.
The old adage says perception is reality.
Yeah.
I had a guy working for me. He was a great guy, great engineer on every level. Also, a really nice person, right? And he was an engineer. Keep that in mind. He was an engineer, and he was going into a management role. And as an engineer, you need certainty. You're not going to commit to something if you can't prove it. Right? I mean, I'm an engineer. I mean, my solutions work. Whatever I put on paper, that's how it is.
That's right.
Right? Not so in management. It's all very nebulous. Okay. So people complain. Oh, he's slow. He doesn't really give me what I need. Blah blah blah. So we had a chat, and I said, look, you're a great guy. You're doing a great job. By all indicators, I couldn't ask for more. But you're being perceived to be these things. Why do you think that is? When certain things come your way, what do you do? What do you say? How do you react? And then when we talked it out, and it turns out he reacts like an engineer. He wants certainty. He wants to give certainty. So if somebody comes to him with a problem and says, "Oh, buddy, look, I got this problem and I need some help," blah blah, and he will think about it and he go, "Let me come back to you." He'll seem like he's procrastinating. He's not procrastinating. He wants to give that person the best possible bang for their buck. He wants to give them certainty, which might not be possible. So I said to him, forget all of that. The first thing you have to do when you're in leadership, management, etc., is instill confidence. That's the very first thing you have to do, right? If someone comes to you with a problem, be it a person that reports to you, or a person that needs something from you, or even a superior person in the hierarchy, the very first thing you need to project is confidence. There's a problem here. No problem. We're looking at it. Well, what's the problem? Okay, I'll get back to you. Let me look at it. I'll get back to you. We'll figure it out. If I can't figure it out, we'll figure a way out together. Okay? And you might not be able to help that person in the final analysis. But at that point, the person will walk away from the exchange thinking, okay, great, thank you. Thank you for trying to help me. Wonderful. Rather than, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to come back to me with what, with when, and how, right? No good. Give the confidence up front. If we can't get there, that's okay, because maybe we can't get there. But that person that we've just that we had the interaction with now walks away understanding, okay, he's going to help me.
That's right.
He'll drive to an outcome for me, and it might not be successful, but ultimately, that matters less than the feeling the person got from getting help.
Yeah, it's all about setting expectations.
Yeah,
I know.
100%.
Mickey, if someone came to you with maybe a laptop, a friend of yours, right? A laptop that looks like it's been run over by 100 vehicles, and they go, "Can you get the data back?" So from a technical way of answering it, really unlikely, but we'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Right, that's a technical response. Anybody else would go, forget it, it's never going to happen.
That's right.
First response. So just knowing what the possible outcomes are is what a good engineer would normally convey immediately. Yeah. It's about all the outcomes. But
that's not what the person needs or wants.
They don't want that, no.
And do you know what the kicker is here? So after a week or so of this I guess is these changed behavioral patterns, people came up to me and said, "I don't know what you did, but hey, it's done."
Yeah, there you go.
He had a talk. Mm-hmm. So let's be very clear. He didn't change the way he worked. He just changed the way he responded to people.
Exactly.
Okay? So he was always a gun, but now the people could see that he was a gun. Right? That's the truth of it.
Was this Is Your Life? Is that what this was? Anyway.
Yes, well, it wasn't me. But look, but perception is reality, though. And
Yeah.
if you take it further, maybe if we all believe in the Earth being flat, maybe it really will be.
And that's the end of the show. We'll see you for Plato's Cave at 7 a.m. Tuesday, Thursday, and then back again for Shiny Setup next weekend. And in the meantime, be safe, stay safe, and be nice to people.